Come, imagine with us.
Can and may we, in present-day Berlin, imagine a Middle East unified in peace and equality?
Across national borders and religious and lingual divisions.
With literature, discourse, and music.
Cinema, performance, poetry, special feminist and queer discussions.
The 4-day Middle East Union Festival, with guests from all over the world, makes this vision seem within reach and invites you to freely explore ideas of utopia.
Come, imagine with us.
Hello and welcome to the Middle East Union, to the Festival of the Middle East Union. Thank you all for connecting to us today. We have an exciting panel, The Literary Vision, Binational Literature and Translation as a Middle East Union Culture. And today we have three interesting participants. Before I will introduce them and their biographies, I want to talk a bit about what we're going to have in this panel. Well, the lack of translation from Arabic into Hebrew and vice versa is often described as a challenge to the cultural understanding. However, participants in recently established translation project at the Leer Institute in Jerusalem under the name of Maktub and the Translators Forum turn a spotlight on living and breathing Arabic prose and poetry. They will talk about their work practices, about the vision, and also they will present us with their latest publication, Amputated Tongue, Palestinian Prose in Hebrew. And let me introduce our three panelists today. First, Professor Yehouda Shenhav is a professor emeritus of sociology at the Tel Aviv University and a senior research fellow at the Leer Institute in Jerusalem, as well as a member of the scientific committee at the Center of Advanced Studies in Nantes. Is the editor and co-chief of Maktub, editor-in-chief of Maktub, binational translation of Arabic literature into Hebrew. Dr. Rawya Burbara was born in Nazareth at 1969. Dr. Burbara serves as Chief Inspector, Director of Arabic for Native Speakers of Arabic at the Ministry of Education and a lecturer at the Language Department of Oranim College. She also a writer, and her 10th book was published in 2021, collection of short stories titled I Don't Want to Get Used to You. Her Arabic novel titled On the Shores of Wandering was translated into Hebrew and published by Pardes 2020. She is also an editorial member of Maktub series and a member of the Translator Forum at the Leer Jerusalem Institute. She is also a member of Mahmoud Darwish Association. Eyad Barghuthy was born in Nazareth in 1980 and lives in Accra. He is a writer, a translator and editor. He is the deputy editor of Maktub series of translation from Arabic literature into Hebrew. A collection of his short stories titled Bain al-Bayut was published in 2011 by Dar Malmiya, Cairo. His first novel, Bard Akana, was published in 2014 by Dar al-Dab in Beirut, and in 2021 it published into Hebrew titled Akreska Tale. Barghuthy has written, translated, and edited children's books. And I welcome you all to the panel. Thank you for joining us, Yehouda, Eyad, and Rawya. So we'll start with the first question. why are you translating from Arabic to Hebrew, and how many books you translated so far, and how much is translated from Arabic to Hebrew in Israel?
Thank you, Mati. I will take the lead and start, provide some kind of a bridge version of the Maktub project with my two dear friends, Rawya and Eyad. The project is a joint venture of Palestinians and Jews who translate Arabic literature into Hebrew. Literature includes prose and poetry. Prose includes novels, short stories, and classical memoirs, poetry, plays, and the like. We published so far since 2017 approximately 20 books. 1/3 of them are Palestinian novels, which is respond to the green rate of translation of books from Arabic to Hebrew, which is virtually zero. I mean, you'd find 1 or 2% of all translation from Arabic compared to English, French, German, Italian, which flourishes. For example, during the 150 years since 1870, there were only 25 novels that were Palestinian novels that were translated to Hebrew. This is really a shame, and part of this project is a political project to remedy this kind of situation. We have to say that in particular, in the Palestinian case, where the Palestinians don't have a central state archive, where all the information, historical stories, etc., are being collected, literature is the site where you rewrite the history and the story, not only history, but the stories of what took place here in Palestine in the last century or more. We have to understand why it is a political project, because the Israeli society is hopelessly monolingual society. And the Arabic is being erased gradually from the public sphere, from everyday spoken language, while Arabic was the lingua franca of the region for many years. Mind you, we live around 200 million people who speak Arabic. And one of the most surprising finding that we had is that the Jewish Israeli society is completely illiterate in Arabic. Only 0.5%, less than 1% of the Jews in Israel can read a novel in Arabic. This is, I don't know how to name it, a scandal, an indication of the severe colonial relationship between the languages. Mind you, half of the Jewish population was also of Arab origin. And Arabic was erased gradually in the last 70 years, since 1948, which is unfortunate. And part of it is we want to bring back Arabic into the forefront as a spoken language, as a sister language of the Hebrew. I myself love Hebrew more after I have studied Arabic, because those are really, really sister languages. And we talk about the relationship between Arabic and Hebrew in the pre-colonial regime. I mean, there is a Hebrew that is not part of the colonial regime, of the colonial language, of the military language. We have what Anton Shammas would call Lugat al-Nu'ma, the language of grace, which is very much in tune with the Arabic, and you know what I mean. But we have, in addition to that idea to publish more and more novels and literature from Arabic to Hebrew, that the Jewish population will be acquainted with this literature. we have an ulterior motive, and this is translation. Because translation is not an apolitical site. There's a lot of politics in translation. And the way translation is being done is very important to the way this literature is being presented. And in this case, we modify or amend or revise the dominant model of how translation is being conducted. Because since the beginning of the modern era, we face what we call the holy trinity of translation. One translator, one language, one version. And this is the essentials of the modern translation. A person sits by themselves using a text with dictionaries and books and whatever, and they sit by themselves. They are mute. They don't have to speak with anybody, and they translate from Arabic to Hebrew. And in the practice that was taking place in Israel, guess who was best represented among those translators? Jewish translators. And I don't have anything against Jews. Some of my best friends are Jews, but it doesn't make sense that only Jewish translator would translate Arabic literature. So we translate in teams, what we call binational teams, always Jews and Arabs working together in dialogue. So we bring into the function of the translation the function of dialogue, which was from the beginning was the function of any translation, is to dialogue. So what happened to the function of the dialogue in the last 500 years? And particularly in the colonial context, this kind of a holy trinity model, one translator, one language, you have to iron the outcome into one language without the reminiscence of the other language, and one version, a clean version, is lack of dialogue. And we have many versions, you have a dialogue. So once upon a time when they translate the Bible, so they have translations standing next to each other, because they are in dialogue with each other.
The 70 sages.
Yes, I want to add something, if Yehouda. Yes, Yehouda?
Yeah,
yes. No, I will answer his question. Why are you translating from Arabic to Hebrew? We live in the Middle East, and the majority of the people in this area speak Arabic. We live in Israel, a country where the Arab constitutes 20% of the whole population. The rest are Jews, but even the Jews who came to Israel from the Arab countries and whom we call the Arab Jews don't know how to read and write Arabic and don't know the conditions of their neighbors. They know about us and they get our news from the Jewish media. Mm-hmm. Actually, they don't know about our reality, our heritage, traditions, and our special culture. Therefore, it was necessary for us to build bridges for communication for them. And we found nothing better than translation, especially translation of Palestinian Arabic literature, which was called by Salman Natour, the writer Salman Natour, as the black books. He said, if you want to know a certain people and their secrets, open their black books and read their literature. Therefore, it was necessary that we translate from our Arabic literature into Hebrew so that we reach the other, the Jew, and through knowing our literature, make him know our social and cultural life, our feelings, our thoughts, and our dreams. And above all, know us as real human beings. And stop looking at us as the other.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Eyad, you want to contribute also to this question?
If you want, I can give you an example. When one journalist from the Mediterranean called me and he wanted to make an interview with me, and he said, do you know, when I started to read the first story at the Amputated Tongue, the story called No, from a Palestinian woman writer from Gaza Strip, He said, when I started to read the story, I throw away the book. I said to him, why you throw the book away? What happened? He said, I was a journalist in Gaza, and I look for everyone in Gaza equal. They all were the enemy. And when I read the story, I know that there is another occupation on Gaza, not an occupation on the houses, an occupation of the men to the woman in Gaza. And I know another thing that I didn't know before. It's very important to translate that they will meet us to open the black books. Yes.
Eyad, I want to ask you, what is for you special in the translation process of Maktub as a collective work, which is very unique in the world of translation? We cannot hear you, Eyad.
Yeah, you ask what is special in this work. All of this work is special. It's a unique model. I'm a translator since many years. I didn't work in the model of collective translation. I was alone, facing my laptop and the dictionaries, asking myself questions and sending the Word file via mail to the editor, and that's it. And I translated into Arabic. So my sphere was the Arabic language because I'm Palestinian. I am Arabic. This is my sphere. This is the sovereignty. Okay, I have sovereignty in the Arabic. But when Yehouda asked me to join Maktub, I was confident because Yehouda is there that there will be something new there, a new approach for translation as intellectual work and as activism also. It's not a professional work as I do in my different missions. So becoming a translation editor in Maktub and becoming a lector. So the first thing I did in Maktub was as a lector. I wrote reports like lecture for books, and I decided I recommended recommending the books that should be translated to Hebrew. So it's a kind of power that I got as a Palestinian to be a vital part in the process of choosing the books. It says a lot about the goals of Maktub.
Can you give us an example?
Examples? All of our books, beside the collection of stories, that there is a special process. We choose all of our books after a process of writing reports, and there is a selecting process. All of our books was really chosen carefully. So what's special there that the whole model that Yehouda described, like one translator, one language, one version, it's not working. It's not our work as a collective translation work. Me as a Palestinian, I also editing the Hebrew version of the Arabic novel or story. I have a sovereignty there. So the issue of sovereignty in general, that it's sovereignty on population and sovereignty on land and sovereignty also on language. So we're not talking about bilinguistic work. It's also it's a shared sovereignty on the text and also on the Hebrew text. So I can discuss and I can choose, and there's what we call dialogue. It's a kind of it's one of the versions of conflict also. We can discuss what is this how this word should be written in Hebrew, because it's original Arabic. So I think it's what's special. It's all special, as I said, but the power I got as an Arab and Palestinians in the Hebrew language and in the Hebrew culture and literature, because after all, it will be in Hebrew, as it will be part of the Hebrew literature translated. But so I think it says a lot, and what I also in the professional aspect, how to understand translation, how to understand the I think one of the sentences that I read then when I started in Maktub and started reading articles and books about translation and about theories, that translation can often be an act of violence. So I understood that what was before Maktub. In general, I know that there was a very important projects like Andalus or other projects, like Mifras. But in general, to let only Jews translate Palestinian and Arabic books, it's a kind of violence. And what we are doing, it's a kind of resistance. Okay, it's a resistance for the colonial situation and the colonial relationship between the languages, and it's a kind of really it's a new kind of resistance. I didn't see it before Maktub, and I think that a lot of people see it now. A lot of professionals like translators and editors and writers, and I think also people know now what's the importance of this books, because as Rawya said, there is an ignorance. People don't know, and why we are doing it's like the question of this part of this meeting, because we are facing the ignorance as one of the bases of the situation, we can call it the colonial situation or the apartheid. There is a linguistic apartheid also. When we are translating from Arabic to Hebrew, we are doing something here and now on facing this situation, to let people know, as Rawya said also, know the culture, know the narrative, and know the feelings, and know details that they didn't have the chance because of the colonial situation to know before that.
So maybe a question for all of you: how it's been accepted? What is the reaction with the month's publication into Hebrew from Arab culture?
With your permission, let me give you a few examples of books that we have published.
Yeah, do so, please.
For example, we published this book, which is called The Letters, El-Rasail in Arabic, which is the communication of exchanging of letters between Mahmoud Darwish and Samih Al-Qasim. The translation of Hani Amit Kochavi and a group of people from Maktub. We published, for example, Shlomo El-Kurd, and the author is a Jewish author, Samir Naqash, who wrote in Arabic and insisted on writing in Arabic also in Israel, although he arrived here as a child. He was 13 years old, but he continued to write and publish in Arabic all his life. Novels of Salman Ilyas Khouri, Awlad al-Ghetto, Children of the Ghetto, and Stella Maris, Salman Natour, Eyad Barghuthy, Mahmoud Shakir.
Maybe you speak about
Rawya Burbara.
Maybe you speak about about that book about Gaza.
Amputated Tongue.
And this is the book that,
and my novel and Eyad's novel.
And Eyad's novel an Accra-esque story on the football team or soccer team, Palestinian soccer team.
In Arabic, Burdakani. Yes.
Burdakani. And this is the collection that Rawya was a senior editor for. This is a book which actually exemplifies the model of Maktub. And in this book, how many people you think participated in this book altogether that work on this book? 100 people.
Wow.
More than 100 people.
More than 100 people. There are 74 Palestinian short stories, memoirs, very short stories, all sort of things that Rawya collected, God knows from where and how, in this particular difficult times where we have to go in very delicately with BDS that we respect, and the writers that work with us support the BDS and nevertheless understand what Eyad just said, that this is actually resistance to the hegemonic literary and cultural dominance of the Hebrew. For example, Mati, we also doing politics in the small technical details, for example, transliteration. How do you transliterate in Hebrew things that were wrongly transliterated in the past in an Orientalist way? So, for example, if we meet Al-Quds in a story, we don't automatically make it Jerusalem.
Yeah.
So we and when Eyad is writing about Akka, we write Akka and not Akko, and we don't, and we not Judaize the
text,
space.
Yeah. But before we go to the other books, maybe I want to ask Rawya about this collection from Gaza, about a bit about the process, how you reach the writers, the reactions. Tell us more about how can a Palestinian from inside of Israel connect to Palestinians from?
It was very hard. 4 years I collect stories from writers from the Gaza Strip, from Al Khalil, Hebron, from Jerusalem, Ramallah, Jordan, Tunisia, Lebanon, France, from everywhere. I can get a story with the permission from the writer.
Also exile.
We don't publish or translate any story without permission from the writer, and it was very, very difficult. At first, it was very difficult. They said to me, Rawya, what do you want from us? Do you want that the Arab people at the Arabic world will say that we are with the naturalization, that we are with Israel, and we agree that of the establishment of Israel state. What do you want from us? I said to him, if you don't want to translate your stories, okay, let the Jews know about us from the media, from their media. They don't know Arabic. They don't look at TV news in Arabic. They just look at their channels, and they know Muhammad Shqir and Jamil Salhout and all the writers just from the Jewish media. Yeah. Let the other know you from your literature, from your stories, and because we are friends. I'm a writer. They are writers. We have trust in each other. They tell me, okay, we agree, and we want to see what will be. And now we are working at the second part of the Amputated Tongue, and it's very easy now. It's more easier. The writers called me and asked for me to put and to translate their stories now. To Hebrew.
Great.
Yes.
Yeah. Maybe Yehouda, you can answer also a math question about the responses for our books, because it's an important question.
ההתקבלות, the acceptance of it in the Israeli culture.
Reception is, it depends. It's a political context. There's more and more interest, as Rawya said, in Maktub, both internally and externally. And we publish the books, the novels. Some of them get received. For example, Children of the Ghetto that was the first novel in a trilogy, which addresses the massacre in Lod in 1948, and thereafter, basically talking about refugees, internal refugees, Palestinians who live on their own homeland, in their own homeland as refugees. And the story goes to the second volume, to Stella Maris, where Adam, the protagonist, goes to Haifa, and he describes Haifa. And now we're waiting for the third volume, which is supposed to come in the fall. And Awlad al-Ghetto, for example, the Children of the Ghetto, in Hebrew, Yaldei Ghetto, was sold more than 4,000 copies.
Wow.
And to talk about the way we perceive that project, which is a political project, we actually had an evening in the ghetto of Lod on the day of the massacre with the descendants of the survivors, and Elias Khoury on the screen from Beirut, talking about the events through the literature.
So you meant the massacre of 48 of the Palestinian lead natives, Palestinian natives of Lod, Lead. Yeah,
yes.
Yes, and that shows you that you know, for example, when Elias Khoury published his Bab al-Shams, which was translated by Andalus to Hebrew, there was in area E1 in between Jerusalem and Ma'ale Adumim, there was a settlement established by Palestinians called Settlement Bab al-Shams. And so you see how reality follows literature and takes idea and imagination from literature. The same thing is here. In a pragmatist approach, we think that our translation, joint translation in the public sphere, are not only part of aesthetic, of literary field, but it's an action in the real world. We sit together. I see Rawya, I see Eyad, we talk Arabic and Hebrew and vice versa, and both languages are present at the same time. And this is actually in contradistinction to the premises of the colonial structure.
But how did you get to the idea? I mean, you were a chief scholar in the researcher in the Leer Institute back then, and then you individually learned Arabic in Sakhnin, I guess it was, right? Where did you learn Arabic in the school? In Nazareth?
Nazareth.
And then
Jaffa.
how it happens, how did you come up to the Leer Institute and tell them one day, I want to make a translation forum, and not only that, I don't want to work individually, I want to work collectively. Where? Tell us about the founding moments.
There's one individual that Rawya has already mentioned and need to be mentioned here, is the late Salman Natur, a friend, a dear friend, that has gone already 4 years ago. Suddenly, he was part of that embryo, this group of people we thought together about the idea of working together. It started actually when Salman, Allah yarhamu, one day asked me, Yehouda, can you translate my novel? Me, you, and the Fall. And I said, what do you mean I will translate your novel? How can I translate a novel? And I said, why not? Let's do it together. And we sat together and we translated together he Aniva Stav, he Anna wal Kharif. It was such an experience that we sat together. I did a draft. He came to my place and we sat together. Actually, Salman, my friend from Dalia, who was one of the first Palestinians who coined themselves, Druze, who coined themselves as Palestinians, and it got him a lot of trouble within his own community and society, but he was stubborn and went with his truth and his identity, and he taught us a lesson how to be loyal to your values. And Salman used to leave every morning his home in Dalia El Carmel, driving to work in Haifa, And it's about an hour drive, and he would occupy me all the morning speaking with me Arabic, and I tell to myself, he's wasting my time every morning. I don't have to escort him when he goes to work. But you know, I miss so much those moments when he actually insisted that I speak with him only in Arabic. And we came with this idea. Then a friend of us, Dr. Yoni Mendel, who you know very well, I need to mention here, was a big pusher on this project. Pusher is not the word. Accelerator of that project. And we said, how do we do that? Because when we do joint translation in teams, mind you, it takes more time, it's more cumbersome, it's more costly. Who would fund such a project? And we were able to garner funds from Mifal HaPies, which gave us complete freedom to do what we want. And the Leer Institute, Professor Shai Lavi was very kind with us and gave us the push to start this project. And you know, we have like now 14 more books underway.
Wow.
And people are working on classical memoirs, on poetry, on more novels. We are issuing 4 Iraqi novels soon. I think Eyad wanted to say something about the Arabic context in large, because we have spoken about that earlier. Eyad?
Yes, the issue that we are doing 2 things at the same time. We are translating more Palestinian literature, and third, if we can imagine, third of the Palestinian novels that was translated into Hebrew since the 18th century, okay, third of them was translated by Maktub. There's only 24, 25 novels. Third of them was translated by Maktub in the last 4 years.
4 years, yes.
Wow.
Yes,
Yeah,
I think that Maktub introduced a new model of school of translation. We are a collective and we aren't. Collective translators and we aren't collective translators. We are individual translators and we aren't. If you see how we work together, the editor, the writer, the translator, the Jewish, the Arabs one, I will give you an example. It's a very good example, I think, when we translated the story by the Palestinian writer Saeed Nafa', and we returned the translated text to Saeed and asked him to read it.
Wait, Rawya, one intervention. Mati, what Rawya is saying now is indicating that there is a dialogue with the author themselves.
Yes.
We have to pay attention to that.
Which is also very rare because...
Saeed Nafa' is the writer, and we translate his story, مشمشتنا الشامية, and I returned the story, the translated story to Saeed to read it. Saeed called me and said, Rawya, what do you do with the introduction of the story? I said to him, we translate it. He said, no, you can't translate it. I told him, it's Rawya Burbara. She's a very good translator. She's a Jewish woman. He said, a Jewish woman can't give us the feeling of the Arabic man or the Arab people after the war of 1967. I want the introduction of the story to see the feeling. I said, Saeed, how can we translate feeling? We can't translate feeling. He said, but we must, Rawya, we must. If the other will read this story, he must feel what the Arabs feel after the war of 1967. I said, Saeed, what do you want from us to do? And he said, okay, let me now translate the introduction of the story. and I gave him to translate it. And there was a dialogue between Saeed and Rawya, a very good dialogue. I learned from this dialogue how can we translate feelings, and this dialogue end in peace, and we published the story. Yeah.
Great story.
Yes, yeah, but it's a good
lives?
example. And
in-
I'll get back to the idea of a dialogue momentarily, but Eyad wanted to say something about the larger context, Awalan.
Yeah, in one hand, we focus in the Palestinian literature because of the political aspect of the importance of the Palestinian narrative in the context of the conflict. But in the other hand, we see the larger picture, and as the Arabic literature as part of the Arabic culture, as one of the most important characteristics of the area. Okay, so in the past, what was translated into Hebrew is main books mainly from Egypt. But what we are doing now is bringing a new, vital, full of life literature from Iraq, from Lebanon, of course.
From Tunis, أحلام. الجزائر, Algeria.
From Algeria, like we are like maybe because of we are talking on the context of the Middle East Union, so it's important also to mention that the way that the Israeli Jews see the Middle East from the perspective of this journalists who are specialists in the more Arabist journalists that see the world from the security point of view, from Orientalistic point of view. That's how Israeli Jews see the Arabic world and the Middle East. What we are trying to do in our small project, after all, we are a small project with a big vision, but what we are trying to bring like an examples of a Middle East with its truth. Okay, not with its idealistic and unrealistic realization. No, we are bringing from Iraq. Really, we had Nabitha was translated into. It's one of the best feminist novels that was written in the last decades. Nabitha in Am Kachaji. It was, and now it's really new, and all the people who read it said it's a phenomenon because it brings a new picture, a new image, and a new life scene from the Middle East. So I think it's important, also important role of Maktoub, and we are trying to do it as we can. We publish 4 books every year, and we have 14 books that already was translated that are waiting on the waiting list. So yeah, it's important to mention that.
Amazing. Yehouda, you mentioned that you work all with personally. Also, Rawya talked about it, and also we have one of the writers, also you yourself, Eyad, was translated. Maybe Yehouda, tell us a little bit about the work with Elias Khoury, one of the greatest writers of the Arab world today, living in Beirut. And first of all, how did he agree to participate in translation with working with you? I mean, it was published before by Andalus, but still, it's he has his opinions, and I wonder maybe you can tell us some stories about working with him about your personal. I read your book about it, and it was really interesting.
It started in serendipity. I was in London, and I bought one of Elias's great novels called Wujuh al-Bayda, White Faces, and I bought it when I started to learn Arabic. And I remembered that I was on the plane back to Tel Aviv, and I opened the novel and read it, and I was mesmerized. I was really mesmerized. The writing of Elias Khoury mesmerizes me, and I felt an instinct, an urge to start translating it, and I took a month off, and I went. I was secluded by myself, and I translated the entire novel, and I was like in a vision, almost in a vision, like a religious vision. And I remembered when I finished translating it, I was crying out of climax, anticlimax, and whatever. Then when I finished translating Wujuh al-Bayda, I realized that now, what do I do now? If I want to publish it, I have to find the publisher. I also have to get the author permission. And I didn't know how to get the author permission. And I was talking to my friend Raef Zrek. And Raef wrote to Elias, and he wrote, there's this and this and this. Yehouda Shenhav translated your book. What do you say if you agree, you give us permission? And he wrote one line, I won't sue him in court. So I got that as an agreement. And after the book was published, I went to New York and met with him. And then we met several times. And since then, we meet twice a year in Vienna with the Kreisky Forum. And since then, I believe, or I defined it as, this is an example of what Rawya said about the dialogue with the author. As I was in dialogue with Eyad when I was translated him. I was in dialogue with Rawya when I translated her short stories in the past. One of the first stories that I translated was Rawya's. And I remember that we spoke, and we met and we talked. And with Eyad, it was the same thing. And we talked about the translation. And basically, if you compare Eyad's original novel in Arabic and the translation in Hebrew, you see differences. You see, for example, there's a long introduction that wasn't there in the source, in the Arabic source. And this is part of what Rawya described as a dialogue between translators and with the author.
So
and with Elias Khoury, we reach a stage when we speak as he writes. So I'll give you an example. One day he calls me up and he asked me, can you tell me, Yehouda, when did the trips of the Israeli students from high school to Poland have started? So I Googled it and see that it started in the 90s. And I said, Elias, it started in the 90s. And he said, no, not possible. So I asked him, what do you mean by not possible? He said, Adam, he's the protagonist, is going to Warsaw, and the year is 65. And I said, Mustahil, Elias, it's not possible. He said, but that's what Adam says. Mind you, I went to the Yad Banking archive, and I found a document which shows that in 1950, 65, 66, 67, there were 3 trips of schools to Warsaw until the diplomatic relationship with Israel after the 6 Days War broke down. This is not to say that literature cannot imagine and create reality, but shows the mimesis, the power of literature. Now, when I saw the novel, Stella Maris, I found that the document is part of the novel, the documents that I found in the archive. So you see how this circularity, a dialogue, we have to say something about dialogue because dialogue got a bad reputation. Dialogue is not a simple conversation. Dialogue is not coexistence, a term that we hate to use, which is some liberal concept that as if, people speak with each other, there's good relationship, all this kind of thing. A dialogue is not necessarily a consensus. A dialogue is also a conflict. A dialogue is a circular relationship when the translation feeds back into the source and the source feeds back into the translation, and translation work with each other. And those kind of things is make a dialogue, make the translation part of reality, part of political reality. It's not a one-way trip. When a translator takes a book, translates it and publish it, and that's end of story. No end of story here. It goes back, it feeds back, it creates more originals, so to speak. And this is basically the idea behind Maktub. Now, when Elias Khoury, what?
I wanted to ask one question in that terms, maybe the question of who do you translate to? Because the Jewish, for instance, audience that the Hebrew Jewish audience doesn't have, for instance, a lot of the context that some of the Arab, Palestinian, and other writers have. And it's a question of translation when you, for instance, talk with an exiled Palestinian writer or a writer that lives in the West Bank, and he has different context than the writer that lives in Israel. And so, how do you imagine your animan, the one that reads your novels in Hebrew? How do you imagine his knowledge? How do you?
So first of all, we don't try to satisfy the Hebrew reader that he or she feels comfortable reading the text, because we have we have a supply side kind of. Sorry for using this economic term. We provide to the Hebrew reader opportunities to know more. We introduce concepts. For example, the book, the letters, we call it in Arabic, El Rasail, in Hebrew letters. So the Hebrew reader knows that El Rasail is a term that they want to use to. Or for example, if I read Eyad's book and he writes, he was an amil. So amil, what is an amil? I don't tell the reader what is an amil. I use the term amil in 2-3 pages, but after 3 pages, I solve the riddle. I say amil, who is a person who cooperates.
With the authorities.
Huh?
Yes, cooperate with the authorities.
Yes, so משתף פעולה, משת"פ. So I take the sovereignty. Eyad talked earlier about joint sovereignty. I take the sovereignty with the author to introduce another plot, a linguistic plot and trap, where the reader kind of wonder what does that term amil mean, until he gets to the 3rd or 4th page and he gets an answer. So in the meantime, he or she keeps contemplating the words and their meaning. And Elias in his Palestinian novels is using a lot of Hebrew also. He has Hebrew sentences written in Arabic letters. And he plays with Hebrew and Arabic as major and minor languages. For example, in one place, a soldier holds a rifle, and an old Palestinian man asks him, Esh hada, what is it? And the soldier answers, Hada esh, and shoots. So, I mean, this is horrible. But the play with the languages, major language and minor language at the same time, deterritorialize the Hebrew language and does not leave it untact, but leave the Hebrew reader not at ease with this literature.
Yes, I want to add. Yeah, Rawya.
Yeah.
The literature, the translated literature, fill the gaps, the knowledge gaps that the Israeli, a huge part of the Israeli Jews are having, okay? Israeli Jews don't know about the Arabic culture and about the Arabic word and really about the Palestinian narrative. So we can't assume that because they don't know, we won't publish a literature. We are publishing a literature in order to fill this gap. And it's a source of knowledge. I think that literature is the best the best source of knowledge in human issues. So in general, we announced a new program, a subscribers program in Maktoub, and now it's also an opportunity to build a community and to have an interaction with this community. We have also, for this project, we met a lot of organizations and people, a lot of people who are interested in literature in general and in history and in the conflict, in the relationship. So a lot of people that are really interested in the content of our books are part of our main targeted audience.
Yes, I can give you an example why Maktoub is a very important school for translation, and I think that all the translators all over the world must learn from Maktoub way of translate. I will give an example. It's related to cultural specific and heritage issue. When Yehouda, when Yoni Mendel translate the story of Tawfiq Fayyad, and he called me and asked. He said, Yoni said to me, Rawya, how can I translate the sentence وأتت الأفعى على الفدانين? I said, Yoni, I don't know what you are talking about. Can you read the whole paragraph? And he read all the whole paragraph, and I said, I don't understand. And he said, you are Arab and you don't understand what Tawfiq Fayyad write? I said, yes, I don't understand. So I called Tawfiq Fayyad in Tunisia, and I said to him, Tawfiq, what's the meaning of وأتت الأفعى على الفدانين? How can a snake kill a unit of land? Can a snake kill a unit of land? Fadan, it's a unit of land. And he laughed and said, wow, Rawya, you don't understand the dialect of the Palestinian peasant. When we said Fadan, Fadanain, and we mean the both bulls, oxen, the cows, and the snake kill the cows. If Tawfiq Fayyad didn't translate to me and to Yoni, we will make a big mistake in translation. So Maktoub based a school for translation in the world. The translation must be binational.
And so there's other examples of this working in collectively in a place of a conflict and colonial regime and still doing this wonderful binational translation process. You went to conferences, or did you meet with other people that know about this project, or you are a unique project also in the world, not only in Palestine, Israel? Rawya.
Yeah, do you have an example?
I think that what we did last year in Cambridge, Yehouda, and in King's College, before the coronavirus, and we have and part because of the actors of Maktoub, we also interested in research. Not only we are producing, also we are developing a new research in the field of translation. So we participated in in two events in King's College London and in Cambridge. We talked about the the translation in conflict zones. So yeah, so it was an opportunity for us to share our knowledge, and it's also important to thank you and to thank your festival in letting us really share our experience, our vision, our stories also to your audience.
When my story was translated, I read the story and I asked myself, I write something like this. I don't believe it's not my story, and I read it once again, and I return to my story at Arabic language. Oh my God! Who changed the end of the story? And I was very excited. Who can do something like this and change the end of my story? It's my story. And I returned to the translator. He said, no, it's not me. So who can do it? And it was the linguistic and literature editor.
Uh-huh.
And she said to me, Rawya, the Jewish reader, when he reads this end, he will like it more. Let us try. And I said, okay, let's try. And we published it in Hebrew in the other ending of the story.
Uh-huh.
And one translator read it at Hebrew and said, I want to now translate it to English. I said, okay, I will send you my Arabic text. And she said, wow, this end is very good. The end at the Arabs, and it's a dialogue. It's a dialogue between us, and that's our literature.
Yehouda, you told the story.
Anything,
You told
and
the
we
story.
can refuse anything, and it's a real dialogue.
Can you repeat the last sentence? I didn't hear well.
We can accept anything and we can refuse anything. It's bilingual, binational. You can hear the other. You can accept what he says to you, and you can refuse it. It's a dialogue.
It's a wonderful sentence. It's a wonderful sentence. We can accept, we can refuse, and we are in dialogue. And I tell you, Mati, beyond all this, I think that this is a model for politics itself. It's not only a model of translation, and that's how in this interdependence between Palestinian, I wish this interdependence between Palestinian and Jews would characterize the region, the way politics is working, and what Eyad has called earlier joint sovereignty or shared sovereignty, where sovereignty is not a monopoly of one ethnic group, what is being shared by Palestinian and Jews together.
And Eyad, maybe it's a question for you about this wonderful idea that now also Palestinians have sovereignty about the Hebrew. So how it feels, maybe this moment when that you are also editing the Hebrew, and it's part of your sovereignty, not only as a sovereignty about the Arab, of course. How it feels?
It's a kind of a new approach that how to treat language, how to think about language, and how to feel regarding it. Is the language your enemy also, or it can open her hands and help you also in expressing yourself? If we are against the division, okay, against the walls between people, against the idea of dichotomy, okay. There's Arabs with Arabic, there's Jews with Hebrew, and there is walls between them. They are here, they are there, and we are here, and that's it. If we are thinking about also in the idea of the area, all of the Arab world and the Middle East, we can think about walls and about dividing people and languages and cultures, because it's not real. Okay, Jews used Arabic, and Arabic was also tool for Jews in religion, and beautiful tool in beauty and different things. And Hebrew is part of our life also. We can use it in the education and in the also in different kind of so. And there's a similarity between the two languages. There's a colonial relationships between them, but it's also there's other aspects also. But when I see that our role is, sorry for the word, but is to demolish the walls, okay, to erase the walls, and part of this is to erase the walls between language and to change the space of the language at a space that design consciousness and design awareness of people is a space that we can do something there, despite other spaces that is more controlled by the regimes and by the military, and it's more difficult now to do that. Okay, so in the space of language, and it's the same space of culture, and the same space of meaning, of meanings and meanings, generating of meanings. Okay, so it's a space that the language, the Hebrew language, called me, and it's a kind of a scene, and she asked me, "You can use me. I am the Hebrew language. You, as Palestinians, can use me. Express yourself by me. Also, I am open." Okay. I was used to erase the Arabic language in the historical Palestine. Use me in order to replace, to return it back by me also. So when in my novel I used Akka in Hebrew, I did the resistance I told you about.
Yeah, opposing translation.
Felt that I'm liberating Akka. I'm bringing Akka back in the space of the Hebrew language. So it's what's Hebrew now do to me as Palestinian.
It's wonderful.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's wonderful. I want to ask Rawya one question also as a woman, because the translation process, as Yehouda at the start of this conversation talked about, the one man sitting with one text, it's one language. It's a very man kind of idea, and sitting together in a dialogue, it's more like a feminist media approach to translation. How it is as a Palestinian woman sitting together, how many people working on one book, and how is it also in terms of gender with decision about which book to translate, and the role of Palestinian women writers and so on? Do you?
Me? I thought he was...
for you as a woman.
As a woman. I think that what we are encountering is, as we expected, and we encountered that in the project of Lisan Matura, of Amputated Tongue, to bring more and more female voices, women voices, and Rawya did a great job there. There's 1/3 women, not 50% women. This is as far as she could garner. At the
25% of the writers are women.
25% of the writers, but we also try to introduce Palestinian women translators to Hebrew, as Eyad said, that Palestinian translators are translating into Hebrew, which is important also. And all this is, I like the idea that is this kind of more feminine kind of model of translation, which is not based on a dominance, on a monologuist way, but on a dialogical way, and where you'd find more and more deliberation, which are not necessarily consensus making,
Yeah, yes, but
we have the Bedouin writer Sheikha. Sheikha Halewa. She's a Bedouin writer, and after publishing the Amputated Tongue, we established a group, a Zoom group that we called Listening Ear for the Amputated Tongue. And this group from Arab and Jewish people, and we read the translated text in Hebrew, and we meet every week and make the dialogue between us. And sometimes we invite the writer. We invited the most women writer to this group, and it was amazing. It was the Jewish woman said, wow, this is the Arab woman. We don't know it. She lives beside us, but we don't know it. Now we can know Sheikh Halewa, the Bedouin woman. We can know Inaq Mawasi from Baqa al-Gharbiya. We can know Asmahan from Majd al-Krum. And it was another world. We opened another door for the Jewish to know the Arabs woman.
Great. That's what I want to know. It's Rachel Peretz is also part of it. Rachel Peretz, no? It's one of the women that translated Sheikha Halewa.
She was literary editor of the Amputated Tongue, and she did a great job.
Okay, let's check if we have a question from the audience in the Facebook. If not, I'll ask you one more question. Just a second.
The audience.
By the way, Mati, we are going to have in October a session in Mishkenot Sha'ananim for 3 days.
Yep.
We are going to start a group translation over the text and the stories for the next volume of Amputated Tongue.
Yes.
Yeah, but the question of women and men, we have our gender sensitivity. We try as we can. But also we don't divide. Okay, it's a kind of also collective and shared. We are working, women and men, and together. Also, we are trying to have to bring more voices of feminists and women writers. But it's not a part of make like a version of woman voices. No, it's yes. Together. We don't have this division in our work.
It's the Palestinian, yes.
I don't see questions, but so I wanna. I know this story about the סיפור שמתחיל בגבות של ערבי, the story that starts with the Arab, how do you translate gabot? No, it's felt the story that you told about Elias Khoury. Can you tell us the story, Yehouda, about translating this term?
Yes, it's a story that goes like that when I translated Majma' al-Asrar, which we translated as Pkach el Sodot.
Yeah.
There's a story there about, Elias Khoury always gets into other texts and comes and goes. So he writes about the protagonist that is also in Chronic of Foretold Death by Marrakech. And what we find is that he describes Ibrahim Nassar, who is supposed to go to Colombia following his uncle Yaqub Nassar, but apparently Yaqub Nassar is murdered in Marrakech's novel, and the trip is cancelled. So Elias Khoury describes the Ibrahim Nassar and describe his Yaqub Nassar describes it the way Marrakech describes him. That he said that he has a thick eyebrows.
Eyebrows, yeah.
And etc., etc., etc. When I translated this novel, I wanted to use the Hebrew translation of Marrakez, and in Marrakez, the Hebrew translation, I find it said eyelids, not eyebrows. So I call the Hebrew translator and ask her, can you find out what the source says, eyebrows or eyelids? Not that it's so important, but I was curious what's going on. And she goes back and said eyelids. Elias Khoury was wrong. So I called Elias and I said, Elias, does it say in the Spanish original eyebrows or eyelids? And he says, of course, eyebrows. Have you seen Arab eyelids? There are Arab eyebrows. I said, what do we mean by Arab eyebrows? He said, go to the mirror and watch yourself and you see what Arab eyebrows mean. So I write eyebrows and not eyelids. And after that, I'm saying to myself, but Elias Khoury doesn't read Spanish. Where did he find this eyebrows kind of thing? So I go into the Arabic translation of Marrakez, and the translator, Saleh, can you help me?
Almani,
Saleh Almani, writes indeed eyebrows. And I said, maybe Saleh Almani doesn't know Spanish sufficiently, and this is the source of the problem. So then I Google Saleh Almani, and I found that he translated 100 novels.
Wow.
From Portuguese and Spanish to English, to Arabic. And I said, okay, so this is even more intriguing. And I go to the English and the English and French translation, and trying to find out what's there in the story, and I find the third term, eye poopers, the parts of apayim. So is it gabot, afapayim, or risim in Hebrew? The translation of what Marrakez / Khoury / all the translators are saying. So this kind of confusion is not atypical. This is a part and parcel of every translation. And I think that we kind of reached the conclusion that there is no source to translate, that every source is the sum of its translation.
And do you think that your project will, Rawya and Eyad, you think that the project as a whole will also influence the cultural sphere, goes out from the Leer Institute out to publishers that will take this model that you invented or created, or unique model of translating binational translation?
Yes, I will tell you, these stories gave a new opportunity for a new vision between the Jews and the Arabs, and opened a new tracks at the Israeli universities for teaching translated Palestinian literary texts for the first time since 1948. Wow. Jewish students learn Palestinian stories and provided materials of criticism and historical literary research. But the most important point is that they established bilateral relations that are established on real knowledge of the other through a constantly developing dialogue.
And the question, and this question of translating, it's not only translating, you're creating new literature. So you think that also, like, writers that are now watching and reading the books, both from the Palestinian and in the brightest context of Arabs and inside of the Hebrew context and the Arab-Jewish context, this model, this I don't know, let's say spring of fresh water that wasn't that so many years was dry, and I mean there was some experiences to try to translate. We didn't talk about them, but there was Mifras with in the 70s publishers, and there was Andalus in the later on, but this new translation project, it's also inflicting now that I think about it, it's also it's also will influence the writers themselves. I mean, Yehouda already talked that Elias Khoury is doing this experiment in his writing, but you also as writers, translators, you think that also it will be influence the writers in the broadest vision of the area?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure that it will influence the writers, but it can open for the writers. It can open the opportunity that their text will be translated into Hebrew. That it's a kind of doing something else with the literary text that generally was translated into English and sometimes or French or other main languages in the world. So translate to Hebrew with all of the tension, with all of the conflict, for the Arab writers, when it can be an opportunity, maybe the dialogue will be there also somehow. But I think the impact also can in the area. If we're talking about, and we have the last minutes of our session,
yeah.
But I think it's the issue of what role can literature play in our area that full of conflicts between different groups. Okay, how can it help us to understand the history from the point of view of the different groups, and how can it help us also to imagine the future of this area as a part of it, and how literary writing and translation as actions that we do here and now can be something that writers and translators can do to face the different forms and situations of injustice and of that inequality and ignorance and all of that. I read an article today from an Egyptian translator who lives in Istanbul about the issue, the conflict between Arabs and Turkish, and and he said he just had he used what Aziz Nissim, the important Turkish writer, say when after he visited Egypt and Iraq in the 60s, what he said about the importance of translation between from Turkish literature and Arabic literature. That he said that it's the thing that can change the situation, the hate or between Turkish and Arabs, because it's not about governments and about trade and about economical. What can let people understand each other and change the whole stereotypes and it's literature. But still till now, what's started from, and there is a lot of policies that really decide what will be translated. So I hope that in the different groups, also in the area, different nations that have like a history or tensions, also translation can be helpful. So maybe if there will be a collective translation between Turkish and Arabic will be maybe something that can maktub help.
In Arabic we said ما تقولش بعرفه حتى تعاشره. You don't say that you know him till you live with him. And after we had this experience in translating, I wanna change this sentence and said, you don't say you know him till you read his literature.
And translate.
Yeah, because it's the full subjectivity of a person in translating.
But last sentence, Mati, we spoke about the Palestinian cause, and I want to speak about the Jewish cause as well. I think that what we are doing is also for the sake of the Jewish community to become this is a distinction that Salman Natur has used. He asked if the Jews came to the Middle East without learning Arabic, that means that they are possibly going to be temporal residents, not permanent residents. And I think that the Maktub project is also geared to transform the Jewish community from temporary resident into a permanent resident in the region.
Maybe from de-Arabization to re-Arabization, because if we learned about de-Arabization that they did to the Arab Jews, and now you re-Arabs, and also you talked about the language, because they said that the language is you don't Hebraize the Arabs, so you let the Arabs stay there, like what we saw with the books that you showed already. So it's great. It's a new language of Hebrew. It's a possibility of a new Hebrew that has as a decolonialized mission, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Yehouda Shenhav, Eyad Barghuthy, Dr. Rawya Burbara, and thank you for giving us a glimpse of this amazing, pioneering, visionary project of Maktub. Really, I hope you will inspire not only the region but also other places of conflict in the world. And for me, as one of the representatives of the Festival of the Middle East Union, if there will be ever a Middle East Union, it's you already has the seeds of how to work together in a binational and a decolonized project. And I wish you a lot of books to translate and to publish, and a very fruitful work in the future. Inshallah, God will give you a lot to continue.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sharafna.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you a lot. Okay.
Come, imagine with us.